welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I'm Dr. Greer, and I'd like to thank the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to give you an update on the work we are doing at disclosureproject.org and CSETI.org, and also the OrionProject.org. And I'm joined today by Linda Willitts, who's worked with me for about 12 or 13 years on the CSETI project and Disclosure Project and making contact. And thank you, Linda, for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's always a wonderful pleasure.
Well, today we're going to talk about something that's sort of timely because of what we're going to be doing next month in February, from February 7th to 12th. We're going to be taking an expedition out to Boca Grande Island, which is an island off from Fort Myer out in the Gulf of Mexico, as a training expedition for people who would like to join us. You can see what we're doing at CSETI.org. And basically, this is our training program for teaching people how to make contact with these interstellar civilizations using a number of protocols that involve remote viewing, lasers, electronic tones, and various modalities, and the kinds of things that happen. And the reason we're going to be focusing on that today is to give you a little idea of what's in this new book. It's just been released this fall, called Contact, Countdown to Transformation. And in that book, there's also a DVD that comes with it if you order it at disclosureproject.org. The DVD is free. There are video images of contacts that happened in Florida, just on the Gulf of Mexico, north of where we're going to be next month, all the way back in 1992. And in March of 1992, I was asked to go down to an area where there had been a number of events near the town of Gulf Breeze and outside of Pensacola. And we actually had a one-day workshop there in the area. And I think there were 40 or 50 people there, I can't recall, somewhere in that neighborhood, and including a couple of former Air Force pilots and people who were researchers in this field. And that night, we went out to do sort of a demonstration of what we do, and we went out to a beach. Hello, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Faded out a bit.
Oh, yeah, some kind of strange thing happened. But it was on the beach out on the Gulf of Mexico to make contact. And so basically that night, after we were setting up, I think it was around 8:30 in the evening, and we got a lot of video of this. There were actually, I think, 6 video cameras and photographic cameras going. There were a number of objects that came in as soon as we were setting up and had done the protocols, and we were in a parking area right on a state beach by the Gulf of Mexico. And what was very interesting about this is the people who were there were just brand new to doing all this. And, of course, I didn't know at that point, this was very early, and 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago now, that we did this, if anything would happen at all. And then suddenly, just materialized in the sky, not far above us, were these really unusual red-orange pulsing craft that appeared that had sort of also a bluish corona to them. And they appeared, they didn't fly in, they just sort of appeared. And first we thought there were 2 or 3, and then we saw that there were 4 of them. And then one of them vanished. And I started signaling to it. We had been doing the remote viewing to contact the ETs that had come into the area and doing the meditation and remote viewing in consciousness. And we're showing them exactly where we were located. Now, what was interesting is that they were moving towards us against a very, very stiff wind. And if you listen to the soundtrack on the DVD that comes with this new book, you can see these ET craft moving towards us, even though the wind is blowing against them. which would preclude any kind of sort of a balloon or anything like that. They were totally silent, and as they were moving towards us, we began to signal to them. And at that time, I didn't have the really high-powered lasers we use now. I had these really bright sort of searchlights, and so I signaled to them, and then they were signaling back, and it was very, very congruent. So they were definitely under not only intelligent control, but they were locked onto our group, and it was obviously what we call a close encounter of the fifth kind, which is when people make contact and plan to make contact and invite the ETs to interact with us for purposes of diplomatic open contact. And so as these vehicles were moving towards us, and I was signaling, I then said, I should make a triangle in the sky and see if they'll make a perfect equilateral triangle. So I started painting with this really brilliant light triangular, like an equilateral triangle. I pointed in the sky, making that triangle over and over again, and then they moved into exactly that formation. Now, this went on for 20 or 30 minutes. It was quite a long period of time, and what was fascinating about this is that not only was it filmed, it ended up being on the front page of the Pensacola paper the next day because it was seen from that whole area. We were just outside the metropolitan area of Pensacola on this state beach. And on site, there were unusual electromagnetic forms moving around us in the parking lot, which some people sensed. And there were a couple of women who saw this, and they actually jumped in their pickup truck and roared back to town. They were so freaked out because, again, this was a one-day training, and people, really, I think, didn't even expect to see a UFO, never mind have something like this happen. And most people were very happy and excited, but there were a few people who became a little bit unglued and left. And what this taught me was that the ETs, even though this was the very early days of what CSETI was doing to train people to become ambassadors from Earth to these civilizations, that these ETs, no matter when we've gone out, are very eager to reciprocate. They're very eager to respond if the people who are there are doing it for the right purpose and are doing it for purposes of contact and peaceful contact and open diplomatic relations. So that's, of course, the mission of the CSETI project, and we had apparently a very good team there, and luckily we did get some film footage. Now, there's a couple of different shots of this, and it's on this DVD that comes with the new book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, which is at disclosureproject.org, is really the only place you can get that right now. Now, one of the things that I say to people when this event happened is that there was another message that was sent, and that is that we began to, at the early stages, realize that there were these transdimensional aspects of it, not only in the remote viewing and consciousness realm, because I was seeing in my mind's eye the occupants of these craft, but then they were on site sort of electronically astrally projected, to use a concept. In other words, the subtle energy or essence of these beings that were on the craft that we were seeing with our eyes up in the sky were moving around us as these sort of scintillating forms in the parking lot and causing detectors to go off and things like this, which, of course, you've heard us speak about, is now something that happens very frequently, if not always, when we go out now and make this kind of contact. So this all started. This was actually the first, one of the very first mass witnessed CE5s, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which, as I've explained, is a CE5 is when people decide to make contact to these ET craft rather than just passively and accidentally seeing one. So it was a very exciting thing, and I think that anyone who sees, Linda might comment on that since she wasn't there at that time. This was before her time, but anyone who sees the video can sense how exciting and how important this first early contact was.
Oh, yeah, it was really exciting for me to get to watch those original videos because the people were so excited. And another thing, too, attached to one of the videos after this initial footage was some footage from several members of the group. I don't really know how many went out. I think it was the following weekend, just on their own to practice the protocols, and they also had some amazing contact. So, what Dr. Greer says about the ETs being eager to participate if they can in making contact with us is very true. Even way back then, these brand new novice people. Using the protocols all on their own had also some amazing footage.
Right, and really what I had done is teach them the meditation technique of going into deep silent awareness and then awakening in this state of consciousness that is the universal aspect of mind, and then practice seeing space and deep space and sensing where these ETs are. And then when you get a sense of it, you may feel it, you may see it, you then show them where you're located, and you sort of zoom in to your location and guide them into your site. Well, these people, there were a couple people who really were good at doing that, and when they went out on their own, they had further contact, and it was more than once where this happened. And in fact, there is some footage from another event that we have from when they were out doing this. And it just goes to show that now there are a number of things that are around this. One of the there was a major UFO organization whose Eastern director was there when this happened, and he was so astonished that he was going to write it up as a major report and article for a journal, and they blacklisted it, would not allow it to be published. And so much so that this person ended up resigning as the Eastern director for the whole United States for this very large UFO organization. What was interesting about that is that I later learned that this organization had a lot of ties to the intelligence community, and they did not want this information out, that you could make this kind of contact. And he was so astonished that he actually quit his position, and this was a person who was a colonel, who was a former Air Force pilot. There was another Air Force pilot who was there, I might add, and they both confirmed that these were by no means conventional aircraft or balloons or anything like that could be hoaxed, because of the kind of directional movements they were taking and the kind of wind that we were getting, very strong winds coming off the Gulf that night, which you can actually hear in the soundtrack of this event. And the other interesting thing that happened, which is a little bit of history, is that this went all the way up through the chain of command in the military, and it ended up getting the attention of the head of Army Intelligence and some National Security Agency people who, in the following month, invited me to a meeting in Atlanta to discuss what we were doing. Where basically they said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" And, of course, they knew we had discovered the Rosetta Stone of contact. And from that, all kinds of things ensued where they were trying to either buy me off or threaten me or what have you. And this is in my book, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, those of you who've read that book, which is sort of an autobiography of my experiences over the years involving myself with this issue. And the other thing that happened is that there was a book called The Road to 2012, interestingly, and this is 1992, and it was written by John Peterson of the Arlington Institute on a contract for the Coast Guard, but it was intended for all the military. And in it, he issued some warnings about some wild card events that could happen in the future regarding a civilian group that would make contact with ETs outside of the command and control of the military. And in it, he gave exactly, he didn't name our group, but he gave exactly what happened there on the beach outside Pensacola as his example. And he told me later that that when he heard of this event and saw the video and also talked to people who had witnessed it, that this was why he ended up putting that in this book as sort of a futurist view of what may happen down the road. And the book was called The Road to 2012, and it's a very interesting bit of history from the early 90s of what happened. Of course, here we are at 2010, early 2010, January of 2010, and contact is ramping up. So this was actually the event that caused that to be referenced for the military in this think tank's assessment of the sort of wild cards of things that may happen in the future. And it had all kinds of repercussions because literally the senior-most people within the so-called Majestic group who have been keeping all of this secret became very concerned about this, and really knew that the trans-dimensional aspects of the protocols that involved, a lot of times we get ridiculed. Oh, well, Dr. Greer goes out and shines lights in the sky. That's the least of it. That's only the linear part of it, and the electronic tones that we send out, at the beeping tones from the crop circles where the ETs had a phenomenon going on there in the crop circles, where it was an amazing series of tones that Colin Andrews acquired and recorded, and we have now been using since 1992. But what was interesting is that, in fact, the real heart of the protocol is this transdimensional understanding of reality, where you understand that anything that can travel faster than the speed of light crosses into the conscious universe that is in energy fields that correlate very closely to the so-called astral body, or the lucid dream state, or the ability to go into deep meditative states in remote view. And many people find this rather mysterious, but I tell folks, I said, look, everyone's had a flying lucid dream where they fall asleep and then they're flying somewhere. They're literally traveling with this body of light, the astral body, and this is well known in the Puja Vedic literature, since we're on the World Puja Network. And if you study this, which many societies have, in the Aboriginals of Australia, this sort of dream time and seeing through the dream state is considered very normal, and how they communicate with each other at night. And this has been done by civilizations and people since humanity has existed. Now, our materialistic, reductionistic, linear society has forgotten a lot of this, but it doesn't mean it still isn't useful. And in this case, because the ET civilizations have electronic systems that interface with that kind of coherent, lucid thought capacity, that if you learn to do the meditation correctly and you learn to do the remote viewing and then lock onto their electronic systems, you can guide them into your location and make contact. And that's the core of what we're doing. Although it's the part of it that's most controversial, the people within the intelligence community who've studied this for many decades knew that this was the Rosetta Stone of contact, and they were not happy because, I was literally courted by the head of Army Intelligence and his coterie, and then later threatened. And what I find interesting about this is that since now we've trained thousands of people to do this, that people literally in this one-day workshop learned how to do it, went out and did it, and had contact happen. So it's something that, in a sense, the genie's out of the bottle. And this is why we're telling people, come if you can to Boca Grande and be trained to do this. If not, we have all the meditation and instruction materials on the website. They're very inexpensive. It's not like it's thousands of dollars. It's like $10 for the meditation CD and whatnot at disclosureproject.org, so that you can go there and learn these meditation techniques and also the remote viewing protocol for contact. And then if you have a laser or light, and you can get the tones from the website as well, these beeping tones, and go out and play them on a portable DVD player and transmit them over radio signals, you can do everything we're doing. And so I tell people, go and practice this, and you might be very surprised what happens, because people who have done this have literally had craft appear in their backyards and overhead and what have you. So it's a very interesting development, and it all started with these early expeditions that we did. And one of the very earliest ones, not the first one, this was like the second one, though, The first one was in Belgium, actually, when the big triangles that were flying out over Belgium. We can talk about that in another time, perhaps. But this was in '92, and it was in Florida. And I really think that people, when you read this new book, Contact, the Countdown to Transformation, that has the DVD with it that shows how these ET craft have appeared and the kinds of sounds and tones they've sent to us and the kinds of events that have transpired, you'll have a really full understanding of how you can do it and what kinds of things to look for, what kinds of manifestations of higher ET intelligence, how they really appear around us, because it's not always like out of a Steven Spielberg movie. It's often very unusual things, but understandable once you get a good grasp of the concepts of transdimensional reality.
And I'll just add that our training kit, our CSETI training kit that you can buy over the website, or the meditation CD that Dr. Greer mentioned, that you can, it has a meditation on it that you can communicate with the ETs and ask them to come to your location. Those things are very effective. We hear quite often about people, they email us over the website and let us know that, all they have done is purchase this training kit, and they're having amazing contact and letting us know that they're having this contact without having ever been to a training or a workshop, which obviously, not everyone can get to. So you can still do it on your own.
That's right, absolutely. And the other thing that's very exciting is that the people who have done this, and with the correct perspective, and by that I mean freeing the mind of prejudice and freeing the mind of fear, that what is normally pervade as the reality of these ET events is really so much not what's really happening. And I think that it's very important for people to understand that in fact there's a very different reality to the actual extraterrestrial presence than what's usually presented in videos and books on this subject, which is always very scary. That these civilizations are very, very advanced and enlightened and completely non-hostile. And we have had this kind of close contact all over the world for almost 20 years, 19 years, and we have never had anything but the most wonderful experiences. And they're actually, if anything, very gentle about if someone is upset or is becoming frightened because the craft is coming too close or the event is becoming too intense. They actually back off and stop. This is very different from the man-made ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, and the man-made abductions, which are thought to be ET, but they're not. They're actually man-made events that are being used to scare the hell out of people because they want people to be afraid. Fear sells books and videos, but also fear also gives you the justification for spending trillions of dollars in weapons in space and spending trillions of dollars in a centralized global military junta that eventually people could bend their knee before the great, savior of militarism in facing this new reality of ETs that are here. And this is why you hear almost exclusively on, if the subject comes up on CNN or in the news or a new book or a new movie, it's almost always something terrifying, because the people I know in Hollywood and in the news media will let you know that the kind of message we're putting out isn't allowed to get out because they want people to be brainwashed with fear. And the worst is all the New Age community who believe there's the good aliens and the bad aliens and the this and the that. They basically have taken the whole mythology of that and believed it because it's something that is what's vogue and in the conventional wisdom. But the reality is that if there was a hostile civilization out there capable of traveling at multiples of the speed of light, it would be all over already. I mean, there would not be any opportunity for there to be the kinds of silliness we're doing now, where we're using advanced electromagnetic weapon systems to target and hit these ET craft. Now, that brings me to another discussion. There's a man who is an Air Force officer who had been down at this base, Eglin Air Force Base on the coast of Florida, the Gulf Coast, south of where we were located. And he informed me that there were, for a number of those years, a electromagnetic pulse weapon that was hooked to a radar system that would track these ET craft, both from space but also land. And this was a land-based system. It looked like giant horseshoes, great big huge electromagnetic pulse generators. And he saw them. He actually photographed them and sent me information about them. I don't know, they're somewhere in my files. But they were on this remote stretch of beach near Eglin Air Force Base. And he said those had been used to target these ET vehicles when they were fully materialized and very vulnerable due to their electronics and electromagnetic propulsion, because they're not using normal jet propulsion, of course. And actually, he said they hit a few of them where they hit them, and it disabled them. They dropped like directly into the water of the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow. Which explains why they very often appear to us in the astral form, so are not readily visible to most onlookers.
Yes, and this is interesting because, even back then, now this of course would have been, as I mentioned, almost 18 years ago in March, there was this program that was targeting these ET craft, and unfortunately, this is I tell people that until we get the president and the United Nations and other countries to get a hold of this issue and deal with it properly and restrain these rogue black projects from behaving this way, it's going to be a very difficult situation. That CSETI is a citizens diplomatic effort making contact, but within the context of an out-of-control, unsupervised, illegal, but very powerful group of people who have weaponry where they have been targeting ET craft and successfully hitting them. And this is why part of our protocol is that we always ask the ETs to appear only in a way that is safe and appropriate for this time and place. That's almost a mantra because we repeat it over and over again. So we want to make it very clear that we don't want them to take any great risks, that if they need to stay in a dematerialized form and where it's just some kind of an energetic field or tonal event or even a remote view event, that we're happy with that, and that if they fully materialize and are present, to do so only if it is completely safe to do so, and they've evaluated the environment to see if there are any of these kind of weapon systems that are going to be targeting them. And this is not a matter of just my opinion, by the way. There are many people who have come forward talking about this kind of behavior, and even if you look at disclosureproject.org, you will see that there are testimonies of people, for example, who were at the working right at the right hand of the Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Command, the four-star admiral, running out of the Virginia Beach area in Norfolk, Hampton Roads area, when in the early 80s we had a craft come in off the eastern seaboard, and his first order was to scramble jets and order it downed, and to do what he could to down this object. And so, because it was fully materialized, and it was on at least 5 different radar systems. The jets were scrambled all the way from Oceania up and down the East Coast. And this top-secret witness, Merle Shane McDowell, that's in the disclosureproject.org materials, described the fact that this admiral was very upset, Harry Train, Admiral Train, and that he had ordered this thing down. So this is the kind of behavior, not only here, but if you look at the famous 76 case over Iran, the Shah's Air Force at that time had ordered, there was this massive ET craft out over the desert, and they had scrambled jets, and they scrambled the jets and gave orders to fire. And the pilots tried to fire their missiles. I believe they were F-16s, and the ETs just rendered all the electronics inoperable, so they could not fire those missiles. But this kind of insane and reckless and stupid behavior, galactic stupidity to use a term, is something that goes on to this day, except that within the classified world of Majestic, the so-called Majestic group, they have weapon systems that are all trans-dimensional electronic, so-called scalar weapon systems. And they are targeting the ET craft. And this is why in the 50s, not that it was common, but you frequently heard of these craft fully materializing and landing. You hear of that less today, or if they do fully materialize, it's transient, and it's because of the weapon systems that have been developed between the 50s and the 90s that are now fully operational, both in space but also that are land-based, that are targeting ET craft. So the reason I point this out to people is that if you do this, you can try this at home, unlike what the commercials say. But if you do it at home, you should do it with this awareness that there's no place on the globe. It doesn't matter if you're in the Amazon jungle of South America. In fact, one of our witnesses was at a post on the Bolivian-Peruvian border in the middle of nowhere when one of these Star Wars weapon systems targeted one of these small ET craft, and they hit it, and it crashed right near the Peruvian-Bolivian border, and he was, along with his commander, the first person to get there to the crash site. And this is in the disclosureproject.org. If you go to disclosureproject.org, there's videotapes and also books of the accounts of these kinds of military men that have come forward to tell these kinds of accounts. And so that happened in 1993, I believe, or early 90s. So the point I'm making is that this is something that's an ongoing problem that goes across many decades, and so you have to factor that into what you're doing. And be wise in the sense that going out and making contact does not mean that they're going to be puppets on a string and appear fully materialized. They may appear in a dematerialized form. They may appear as an energy field that you see very subtly. They may appear as a tone that comes into your contact site, or a brilliant light that flashes above you, and then it's totally dematerialized. There are 1,000. Literally, when I say 1,000, there's probably more than 1,000 different things that we have seen of how these ET craft materialize. And yet, we continue to have them appear fully materialized, like we did, by the way, if you go to CSETI.org, when we were at Rio Rico, a number of people saw this, but not everyone. But directly above us, we have a photograph of this complex sort of tetrahedral-shaped object, semi-materializing in this photograph that Raven Nabulsi took directly above us one night when we were out making contact, where we were having a number of very strange things happen in the sky. And I think that, you can go to CSETI.org and see this photograph. It's really quite amazing. And so what I encourage people to do is if you read this book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, you're going to have an understanding of all the subtle and nuanced ways that these ET craft appear, which can go from a completely materialized spacecraft, like you can kick the tires on them if they had tires, to things that are much more subtle, where they're dematerialized and still in the sort of etheric energy field, but are visible if you learn how to see with that sort of subtle vision, or with electronic devices that will go off, where they will begin to interact through the electronics, which actually began happening very early on these expeditions on occasion, and now it's happening all the time. It's just astonishing what's been happening in the last 2 years.
And another interesting thing about doing this kind of work on the beach is that you have that huge dark expanse of ocean, and a lot of ET craft activity occurs under the ocean as well, and we've seen that at our Outer Banks trainings. I wouldn't be surprised if we'd see it at the Florida training.
Yes, in fact, there are accounts of people, fishermen at the Gulf of Mexico, being out in boats and seeing these objects come up right up out of the Gulf of Mexico and then lift off and go into space. And so it's going to be a very now we have never, to be honest, done an expedition at this particular place. It's a very remote island. It takes quite a drive to get out there from the Fort Myers airport where we're flying in. I think it's an hour and a half drive, and it's literally we're going to be on the tip of this island out surrounded by water, which would be fantastic. And we're going to be meeting in this oceanfront house that we're renting there out on this island, and that's February 7th to 12th. Be a nice break from the cold, those of us that are living anywhere but South Florida where it's been sub-zero, the whole continent it seems. And so we'll be out there every night under the stars on the beach, and during the daytime we're going to be teaching people about contact, how it occurs, how to do the meditation. We're going to do a puja and teach people the mantra meditations, and also give people the teaching on remote viewing. And then every night we will go out under the stars and make contact and see what happens. So it's very exciting, and you're invited if you can make it.
It's always exciting, and I don't know if you wanted to go into our experiences that we have had on the beach before off of Outer Banks. Most recently, just phenomenal experience at our last training there.
Yes, I know. It's sort of like bookends this whole discussion, Well, maybe you want to go into that, Linda. It's very interesting because it was just last late April, early May that we had about 30 people or 40 people out on the beach at the barrier islands off the coast of North Carolina that are called the Outer Banks, and what an amazing thing happened. We're going to be doing that again, by the way, in April of this year. If you go to CSETI.org, you'll see the schedule for that, and you're invited to come to that as well if you'd like to come out to the Outer Banks. But yeah, why don't you share some of that? It was really interesting what happened this year.
Well, one of the most amazing things about it was it happened our very first night out with a group of approximately 40 people, 25 of which were brand new.
That's right, yeah.
And usually, well, in the past, it has been somewhat predictable that the activity level kind of ramps up over the week that we're out because of the new people in the group, maybe not knowing what to expect. But this was our very first night out in the field, and it kind of all started when in the distance I don't remember the directions exactly, but I believe it was southwest to northwest. The sky was just full of these little flickering lights, and they weren't stars at all. They were ET craft that were way, way out in the atmosphere. And our attention was really directed at that because the sky was so full of these little blinking lights. And in the opposite direction, where not everyone was looking, but plenty of people were, this large craft that was maybe up to 3 inches long at arm's length popped into the atmosphere up high, and it kind of as it moved down and ultimately went into the ocean, it kind of went on and off. So it was almost like a rock skipping kind of through the sky, and it went into the ocean. And I only saw the end part where it went into the ocean. I didn't see it from the very beginning, but Dr. Greer did.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because I was looking to the south and telling the group that the previous year we had this weird manta ray type of ET craft that flew up out of the ocean and flew over the dune and flew right over us at that site or very near that site.
Right.
On this little island that we're on, that's a national wildlife refuge and what was amazing is that the craft, when it came over, came from this southern direction. So I was talking about that and pointing exactly in that direction. So there were about 16 or 17 people, I think we counted, that were looking that way when this thing flew in. And if you hold your arm, those of you listening right now, take your arm and put your fingers, your thumb and your index finger, and measure about 3 inches. Now look how big that is in the sky. If you hold it up to the sky, if you're near a window, compared to, say, a jetliner or something, that is huge. So it was close and it was big. And it came in, and it was fully materialized, lit this sort of golden white color. and it was at a 45-degree angle disc coming in, and it appeared and materialized, and then it would go out and dematerialize. You could see nothing, and then it would rematerialize and then go off, and it did it on and on and off like that, and several times very quickly as it went into the ocean. Unfortunately, the camera was facing the other way, filming these weird things in space. They were above the atmosphere that were like Christmas tree lights that were going on and off. And we figured out those were over Atlantic Command. And I think that what was happening is that the ETs had set up something to let a sort of a protective field so that this thing could come in, and it did, and it went straight into the ocean. The last materialization of it was just before it entered the water right off of the coast of North Carolina. Now, this was astonishing. People were just gasping, of course, to see something that huge and that bright. But what happened after that was even more astonishing, frankly. It's probably one of the most astonishing and bizarre things that you may want to share, Linda.
Yeah, we always sit in a circle of people, and we had positioned our circle probably, I don't know, maybe approximately 150 feet from where the surf was breaking on the beach. And so while we were looking in that direction, because it was towards the, obviously towards the beach and the ocean, that the craft had gone into the ocean. So we were all standing there looking and commenting about it, and we started seeing this like bright flash happening on the beach, and it was approximately halfway between us and where the surf was breaking. We later stepped it off, and it was 90 feet from the that edge of our circle,
right,
which is really close.
Oh yeah.
And it was a bright light that would occasionally go on and off, not in any pattern, but if you looked long enough, it would happen again and again. And it was like a white flash, but sometimes near it would be like an amber flash, and then kind of near it would be a teal flash. So there were actually three that were going off. And our cameraman was filming through night vision, so all the flashes look white, and they're also like they were more sort of pinpointy, but still big with the naked eye, but in the camera they're big, through the night vision. And over an hour's time, we stood there and watched it, and absolutely everyone saw it many times because, with that period of time, and everyone had time to look in the right place and watch, and it flashed over 100 times on our camera.
Yes, it was very interesting because it was, to have an object 90 feet away, it sort of dematerialized. Now, what this was this huge ship that had flown in came up on the beach transdimensionally. So visualize this. It's shifted beyond the speed of light and the speed of electrons and matter, but it's there in that sort of etheric field, and you can see the outline of it. In the center of it are these beings, and this is why I'm convinced these are actually beings that are there. And it's sort of an electronic astral projection. It's like if you took an electronic system that could take your astral body that you have lucid dreams with and turn it into an electronics projector system. And that came up on the beach 90 feet from us, and there were at least three of them because they were distinct colors and going around. And this was seen by everyone for over an hour, and it was around 100 times that these signaled to us. Now, this is so astonishing, and one of the things that was a sort of a hidden message in this is that a couple days before this expedition last year, this was in the end of April, early May of 2009 that we were at the Outer Banks, the G7 country, the top, the G7 are the top industrialized countries and economies in the world. One of them had been meeting with us for a number of years or corresponding about setting up a contact protocol for their country so that they could make contact with these ET beings. And, of course, the wheels of government turn very slowly, and so, that's that. But we had just met with these people who do the briefings for the head of state and the Ministry of Defense for that country on the ET issue. And we had just put them back on a plane in Washington, D.C. We had them in Washington and out here at our farm in Virginia for meetings for about a week. And I was asking the ETs and myself, could we have an event happen with people who were complete novices in the sense that they had not had extensive training in meditation, remote viewing, contact, or what have you. And the answer the ETs gave was this event at the Outer Banks, where 25 people who've never been seen anything like this or done a CE5 to make contact came, registered for the training, showed up, and the very first night we're out there gathered, this event happens. And the message I was told was that mentally I was told, this is your answer. Yes, it can happen, and it will happen. So it was very, very exciting. Interestingly, this was filmed. It's in the, I mentioned this new book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation. This whole event is recounted in there, and is also this videotape is in the DVD that you get. It's part of the purchase price of the book, and we just give it for free, basically, to people from disclosureproject.org. So if you want to see this film footage and read the account of everything that happened there, it's much more involved than what we're sharing. I think you might want to get that. The other thing that's very exciting is that the part that's more personal for me, I didn't. And no one else experienced this, so I just have to share people with what happened to me, is that after this had gone on for a certain amount of time, and we were there remote viewing in consciousness these ET beings and filming these brilliant lights that would flash periodically on the beach, literally in the same location. It was right over the sand, by the way, maybe 90 feet from us, as Linda said. We pasted off the next day, or a couple of days later when it was daylight. What we found towards the end of this, I felt I should walk out to these beings and welcome them officially. And I always put my sort of hands out by my sides with my palms, my hands down, my arms down, and my palms facing out to welcome them, and sort of make a triangle with my third eye and my two hands as sort of a energetic field to both transmit and receive energy and also information. And I walked into the center of where these lights were, and I went into this area that it was a little bit on my right side that was such a blinding light. It was this beautiful light and it was so emotional for me, because it was almost like I could have left and gone with them, and just left. But I didn't, of course, because I'm not supposed to leave yet, I guess. But it was very poignant, and I was so overwhelmed with emotions. I was weeping. It was very emotional, very beautiful.
And those of us that were watching you, we saw you engulfed by a sort of energy where you semi-disappeared into it.
Yes, the people behind me who were watching sort of saw me sort of dematerialize, and I felt like I was. I felt like I was actually, my energy was shifting to where my physical body was dissolving, and it was a wonderful experience. But of course, I didn't leave, because here I am. But the point is that it was a very beautiful and really almost sacred experience, because these are our ancestors from the stars, and I'm quite convinced that these are the civilizations that we're having contact with are the sort of primogenitor, the origins of life on Earth, but also the guardians of life on Earth, that are very, very concerned with the state of the world today, but also very supportive of people who are wanting to make contact to bring the planet into another whole era of enlightenment and new energy and knowledge, and to leave the old and broken ways behind and move forward, which is what this whole time of enlightenment is all about. And these ETs have been very involved with observing this. And I also don't think it's a coincidence that we've had so much contact emanating from the sector of where Sirius and Orion is in the sky. And the Orion transmissions, which are in this new book, that describe the message I received when we had these electromagnetic signals that came in for a couple of hours into Joshua Tree National Park in 2008 last year or year before now, a little over a year ago. And I think those messages are really quite accurate about the time that we're living in and the time we're emerging into. And there's actually a chapter in this new book, Contact, A Countdown to Transformation, that is called The Orion Transmissions. And on the DVD, you can actually hear some of these transmissions. We obviously don't have 2 hours of them, but we have a few minutes of them so people get a sense of how incredible they were as they were coming through our electronic devices in the middle of this national park and wilderness. It was just amazing. And what we found was that, from that experience is that I looked into the fact that if the ancient Vedic knowledge, the Vedanta and the Vedic knowledge and the ancient Egyptian knowledge, in those traditions, it is thought that those wisdoms and that knowledge came from Sirius and Orion. And it's interesting because clearly we're having an increasing level of contact from civilizations that are headquartered out in that sector of space. Perhaps not that necessarily that nebula, but in that area of space. If you look out at the sky this time of year, you can see Orion's belt and Orion's sword and Sirius, which is like a beautiful diamond shining in the sky at night. In that sector is where we were having the transmissions, the Orion transmissions emanating from. And I get the sense that it is the ancient, very ancient, enlightened God consciousness civilizations of ancient times that are very near and very much involved with what we are doing at this point in time.
Another really interesting thing about that experience on the banks at on the beach at the Outer Banks was that almost every time we see an ET craft come into our atmosphere, it is quickly followed within 1 minute's time, usually by a military jet.
Right.
In their efforts to suppress the activity so we don't stir up something really big. And there were absolutely no jets that interfered during this whole hour-long period that we were having, that the craft came down into the ocean and then we were having this interaction on the beach. And that's why we attribute that protective activity to all the little large flotilla of little crafts that we saw out in the sky.
Yes, I was actually told that's what was happening, but now the next day we actually had fighter jets that came right over our house at maybe 200 feet in clear violation of FAA requirements, strafing the house and the beach where we were doing this. People were kind of astonished.
And it was that next day that when you and I were walking on the beach, we saw that what we thought was an island. I mean, I would have thought it was an island, except that there aren't any islands in the Atlantic.
Right, and Raven Nabulsi, if you look at our website, CSETI.org, you'll see a photograph of a disc at that same kind of 45-degree angle out over the water that she had taken. She felt it was there. With the naked eye, couldn't see anything, took a picture, and there's this disc, clearly, that is there hovering over the ocean, all from where the house is that we use for our meetings there in Nags Head at the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But that morning, that next day, when Linda and I were doing our walk on the beach, we looked out, and I was so disoriented, I thought I was in California looking at Catalina Island. Because if you ever walked on a beach and seen an island in the distance, it sort of rises up in the haze, and it kind of goes up, and then you can see the other end of it. Well, there was this object out there, and then I turned to Linda. I said, "But there are no islands off the coast of that. We are the last island until you get all the way to, North Africa or whatever's due, or Bermuda or whatever's due east of the Outer Banks." So I have been there many times. There's no landmass to see, but this looked like a gunmetal gray. It came up and was flat on top and then went down, and it covered at least 3 miles of the horizon, and it was seen by other people.
Right, and it followed us kind of as we walked south.
Yes, and we didn't have a camera with us. There was a man who was on our training from Ireland, I believe he was,
yeah.
And he he didn't know the geography of the area, and he thought it was a land mass, and then he saw that it had disappeared. He did have a camera but didn't take a picture because he thought, oh, well, it's an island also. That's way out there. Well, there are no islands that you can see from this location. I've been there many, many times since I was a child. And so, it is just astonishing what we've seen. But luckily, when it dematerialized and then went up into the sky a little bit, Raven did get a great picture of it, and that's also on this disc, the DVD, I should say, that it goes with the book, the new book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation. So these are all the kinds of exciting things that happen, and from 1991 and 92, when we first started going over to Belgium and went to this area near Pensacola on the Gulf of Mexico and Gulf Breeze area, to as recently as, of course, Joshua Tree in November of 2009, where we had astonishing events happening and contact. This is what continues to happen, and I think it's because the ETs are saying, well, the governments of the world really have dropped the ball since the 50s on this, and the United Nations isn't allowed to deal with this issue because every time they've tried, either the Secretary General has been removed or been threatened, and I know about this quite personally. So the bottom line is that it takes us, and I think this is why, the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the nonprofits like CSETI, have to be the leading sort of vanguard and pioneers of this. And this is why I tell everyone, people should view themselves as the pioneers for space exploration and contact, not the government of the United States or Russia or China or Japan, because, number one, they've dropped the ball. Number two, they have not really have an operational paradigm yet to understand interstellar civilizations. I mean, their understanding is still the state-of-the-art of understanding with astrophysics and space travel is the space shuttle and rockets and things that Werner von Braun invented for Hitler in the 1940s. I mean, this is pathetic. And so the classified world that have these anti-gravity and electromagnetic propulsion devices that are electromagnetic gravitic, as they're called, things that dematerialize and teleport, these really do exist within classified projects, but they're not allowed to be used by the governments of we the people. And the bottom line is those are locked away in a black project, and usually the president and even the top people at the Pentagon and CIA that I have briefed don't even know about the existence of such programs, never mind be able to use them. So the reality is that those of us who do understand consciousness, the science of consciousness, and the ancient Vedic wisdom, and the techniques of meditation and remote viewing, and the understanding of ET civilizations having electronic systems that interface with clear, coherent thought emanating from this deep, centered, silent awareness, that those of us who can understand that, which is everyone listening to the World Puja Network, I would think, you and I are the ones who have to be the ambassadors, because right now Hillary Clinton isn't dealing with that issue, and neither is the Secretary General of the UN, and neither is the Foreign Ministry of Great Britain or Germany or France or any other country. So we're trying to change that, and this is why we're doing briefings for officials as they come in and as I'm requested to do these. But the reality is that action speaks louder than words, and we need action, and this is why we have to proceed.
Yeah, we need to do it ourselves. As you always say, if the leaders won't lead, it's what is that thing you always say?
Well, if the people will lead, the leaders will follow.
Right. And that's where we are, definitely with this topic.
Well, I would just wanted to give you a taste of the things that have happened at the Outer Banks of North Carolina and in Florida, and these sort of oceanic ET contact experiences. We're going to be doing one again in Boca Grande, Florida, February 7th to 12th. Those of you who can join us. I hope to see you there. And I'd like to thank Linda for all of her help all these years, and also the people at the World Puja Network for their fantastic support with our effort, and so we can educate you about these issues and make a really paradigm-changing transformation here in the new year of open contact, new energy, and a new civilization on Earth. Thank all of you, and this is Dr. Stephen Greer with Conversations with Dr. Greer, and until next time, have a good new year, and I hope all of you will look up and make contact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.